Connecting to server. All right, fantastic. Now we're live. All right, so for today's class, we look at parameters in FastAPI. So a very wonderful concept that we cannot do without. We cannot do without parameters as far as API is concerned. Parameters is essential for building an effective and efficient API, or should I say a full working API. You need parameters, right? You need parameters. Okay, so as usual, we'll just switch from our slide to VS Code, and then we'll just put everything there. So whatever needs to be done, we'll just happen there in VS Code, right? So let's do that as quickly, and we just talk about more of it, and then hopefully in an hour time we should be able to wrap it up quickly. All right. So moving to our project folder, and as usual, we already know that our project folder is located in this new folder that we've created. So the new folder we created was endpoint. All right. So let's find that endpoint, and let's use endpoint because that's what we need. So project folder is in endpoint. Let me scan where it was. I think it should be in our desktop. All right, so here it is. So this is basically our new project folder, and everything that we did in our previous class, our setup lives within this folder. So our virtual environment, which we talked about what virtual environment is basically what, like a box that hold every libraries and dependencies that we need for a specific project. That way it helps us to containerize each project, right? So we don't have one library spanning through our entire project. So it means that if we update a particular library, we should be safe, because that library will only be updated in a particular project and not cutting across our entire project, right? So we handle that kind of situation in our previous class, which we talked about with this virtual environment. And this other folder here is where our actual source code will live. So real quick, I'll open up this directory, right? This folder called KC 5.0 endpoint in our command prompt. So we'll be doing this as we move forward. So after some classes, we'll become familiar with this process. Now, why do I need to open up this particular folder in our directory? Sorry, in our command prompt. So I need to open up this folder in our command prompt so that we can somehow activate this virtual environment. Remember, if we don't activate it, we cannot use it, right? So it needs to stay active so we can use it in our project. If not, our project will tell us that a particular library is nowhere to be found. That's because every installation that we made lived within that folder. So that folder needs to stay active. And also, so that just in case during the process of building, we need to install new things, so that we don't mistakenly do install that thing globally, so that we can install it within this particular folder. After that, we can then navigate to our main folder and open up our main folder in our VS Code. Is that process understood? Is there anyone that has question about that process that I've just explained, where we need to open this directory in command prompt? All right, so the silence means that we are following. That is fantastic. So real quick, let's open up, and I think I showed us about 3 ways where how we can open up this a directory in command prompt. So one of the way, I'll just use one of those ways so that we can move quickly. So one of the ways is just simply come and just type cmd in the directory that you want to open, right? Like where I am now, right? I'm in this directory. So if I type in cmd there, it simply means that I want to open this directory in cmd, right? So it saves me the stress of doing cd and desktop to cd, the folder, and so on and so forth, right? So this particular just cut off all those unnecessary process, right? So if I click on enter now, this will open up this man in our command prompt. So this is where we are now, right? That is our KodeCamp 5.0 endpoint. So what do we need to do now? We need to activate our virtual environment. And what is our virtual environment name? If we can't remember, we can simply use dir. dir means list all the available folder in this directory, right? So if I click on enter, I can see that this is our virtual environment and this is what our project folder. So I can just simply navigate and just say library box, the backslash, because we are in Windows, so we use backslash, right? For for those on Mac and Linux, I showed us how we can activate this in our previous classes, right? So /script, scripts with R, sorry, script /activate, right? Okay, so that's activate our virtual environment. So this is what shows us that our virtual environment is active. So it means that we now have full access to whatever has been installed in that folder, and we can also install new things within that folder. So now that we have that active, what do? We can then switch directory to our actual main folder where we have our actual files, right? So I will just cd and then I would say main, because that is our main folder, right? That is our main folder there. So cd main, to change directory to main, and that has been done. So what do I want to do now? I want to open that directory now in VS Code, right? So code. So if and then you put dot. So code dot means open this current directory in VS Code. Now you can only do this if during your VS Code installation, you somehow added VS Code to path, then you can do this. But if you did not actually add VS Code to path, or there were some complications during your VS Code installation, this will not work. So you have to somehow go back to your file explorer, right, and right click and open this in VS Code. But since I already added VS Code to my virtual to my command prompt, so I can go ahead and execute this command. So code and then dot, it means open this current directory in VS Code. So if you click on enter, that will open up that folder in our VS Code. So I think I'm still having a problem with our previous classes, and my controls are still floating and they're not somehow not minimizing for some reasons. I don't know why, but I somehow believe that you guys are not being affected by it, because you guys said in our previous class that you guys are not actually seeing this floating meeting controls. So I want to believe that you are not actually affected. Okay, Joseph, will be your hand is up. You have a question?
Yes, I have a question. Can you still activate this
Joseph, will be
on
your
the
hand
VS
is
Code?
up. Do you have a question?
Are you hearing me?
Sorry?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can
Can
hear
you?
you now.
Okay. I said, can you do the activation of the virtual environment inside the VS Code? Like the code,
Okay, the
the
activation of
prompt.
virtual environment inside the
Yeah, is it possible? Like in
Oh,
the terminal in
okay,
VS Code?
okay. That yes, it's possible. It's possible. Yeah, that can be done. All right. So how do we achieve that? It's how do we achieve that? All right. So to achieve that, what you will do is you have to bring up your terminal. How do you bring up your terminal in VS Code? You simply say control plus backtick. So backtick is this sign. For those of us that don't know, is this sign that lives right up before your number row, the first key before your number row. This sign here, right? That's backtick, right? That thing there, this small thing right there, I showing you, that's backtick. So if I should do control plus that thing, that should bring up a terminal, right? That brings up my terminal. So what I want to do is wait for my terminal to load. So it has finished loading. By the default, once you open up your terminal will open, your VS Code terminal will open PowerShell. So you can do that here. You can do that activation here. There's no problem. Or you are not comfortable with PowerShell, you can just switch to your normal command prompt. So you can just click on this drop down here, this plus button here, right? If you click on it, then you have options of choosing which of the terminal that you use, that you intend to use. By default, it's your PowerShell. So you can choose to Git bash if you have Git installed. You can switch to command prompt if you have command prompt installed. I think there's JavaScript debug terminal and rest of the stuff. But I think the three important ones there is the PowerShell, Git bash, and command prompt. So whichever one you use is absolutely fine. So in on here in my PowerShell or in my VS Code terminal, it's not showing like it's been activated, but behind the scene it's actually activated, right? Because I have it activated here in my command prompt. So what I want to do is I can deactivate this for now. So how do I deactivate? Just do deactivate, and this will deactivate that command, and that's virtual box, that library box there, right? So I click on enter, that should go off. So you can see that it's no longer active, right? So how do I do that here? So first of all, remember I have to be in the directory that I have my virtual environment, right? So how do I do that? Right now I'm in the main folder, right? The main folder, and our virtual environment is not in this main folder, right? a virtual environment is in KodeCamp 5.0 folder alongside with this other one, right? So now how do I do that? I have to just go back one step behind, right? So how do I go one step behind? So I'll simply just say cd then dot means go one step behind, like go to the previous directory before this one. That meaning move from our main folder here and go back to KodeCamp 5.0 folder, right? So if I click on enter, right, you can see that that would bring me one step behind, right? So this is where I have my command prompt, and sorry, this is where I have my virtual environment folder and my project folder, right? So how do I do this? So if I should do dir, this should show me a list of available folders. So these are the list of available folders that we have. So our library box is there. So how do I activate our library box? It's simple. Same command, library box, library, library box. And then remember, since we are on Windows, Windows list is directory with backslashes, unlike Linux and Mac OS that uses forward slashes. So this will be backslash and then script backslash and then activate. Right, backslash and then activate, right? And then I can click on enter, and this should, hold on, it says unauthorized security. So I think this has something to do with PowerShell. So you need some certain you need some certain access from VS Code to run certain execution on PowerShell. So what do you want to do? You want to somehow switch from PowerShell to CMD, to command prompt. So this one requires less this one here requires less authorization compared to PowerShell. Okay, so already I have it activated here. Now I think by default, if VS Code is pointing to your library box, once you open up your CMD, it automatically activates that library, right? So you can see already here that it's already activated. But if it will not be activated and you switch to command prompt and it's not activated, what will you do? So let's deactivate this, right? Let's deactivate this. Deactivate. And then what we do, you want to switch to what, to where you have your library, right? Your library box. So I'll do cd and then dot that will take you back to your KodeCamp 5.0. And then what do you want to do? You want to activate. So how do you activate? You want to say library box, and then backslash script backslash activate. Right, so that gets activated, and then from there you can then move back to your main right, to your main file if you want, right? If you want, but the main thing that is what is let your library box be activated, right? Let your library box be activated, right? Is that understood? Question? Question. Please, there will be guys that ask the question. I hope we've been able to answer your question. Is it still on this, or yeah, left us behind? Has it left us behind? Please, are you guys actually hearing me? Let's not be
Yeah,
that.
hearing you, sir.
All right.
Okay.
So, okay, please, the person that asked the question, I hope that we've answered your question on
Yes,
this.
you've answered it, sir.
All right,
Thank you.
that's fantastic. That's fantastic. All right. So, but
Yeah.
I would still prefer to use my actual command prompt for this stuff, because I don't want to be shrinking my terminal up and down like this, right? To be coding. So that's why I always prefer to leave these things where at command prompt, right? So what I'll do is I'll just close mine. Maybe you can leave yours if you are comfortable, with shrinking of your terminal up and down, but I'm not comfortable with it. So what I want to do is I would close mine, and then I'll go back to my command prompt, and I'll activate it here. So I'll go back here. So cd. So remember, you can tap your up arrow key and you get your previous code, right? So I'll just tap and tap until I get to this command, and then I'll activate it here. Right. So since I'm in the wrong place, so I'll go back here one more step behind, and then I would activate, and then go back to my main. Yeah, so cd into main again. All right. So I'll leave it there as it is. All right. Any other questions? So some people's hands up. Any other Fidelis, your hand is up.
Yes, my hand is up. I wanted to ask what if we open the folder itself, that KodeCamp
Okay.
5.0 this thing, open it with VS Code, will it activate the library box?
Well, no, it's not activate the library box. It just open up. It just open up here in VS Code, and you have like two folders there. So here you have main, and then you have your library box, right? So it doesn't really mean that that is activated. So you're just opening the file here in VS Code, which of course it doesn't. It's not actually recommended to open up your virtual environment box in VS Code, because so that you don't end up mistakenly editing any of those files, because those files that are there, you're not supposed to touch any of them. Remember every module that we installed are basically Python files. So if you go back to your library box, what you will see are a bunch of Python files, basically all the instructions that you've done, so that you don't end up editing any of those files. You don't have to open it here in VS Code. So you just leave it there, right? Just leave it there. So, but then if you open it in VS Code, it doesn't mean that it's activated, right? It's not activated. You still have to go ahead and use that command to activate it. Is that okay?
That's okay. That's okay.
All right, all right. Please, any other question? Any other question? All right. So the silence means no other question. Silence means no other question. So let's go ahead and let's see. If someone here is not okay. Right, so let's go ahead and let's continue. Right, let's continue. Right, so far we at least we in our previous class we saw the basic of creating endpoint, right? And so that what that to create endpoints in Fast API, the endpoint need to comprise a lot of three things. So the path, basically the path is like what the portion of the URL immediately after the domain name. So this portion, so this portion, I don't know what I'm accepting for, but I somehow accepted that. All right, so so the path is basically this portion immediately after what your domain name, like what. Okay, so from this forward slash all the way to the end of that URL is your path, right? So followed by what, by the method, right? So this URL here or this path here, which HTTP method should it accept? Is it a GET request? Is it a POST request? I think we talked about those different kinds of requests, how they behave, right? So GET is basically go and read the data. POST is basically what to send data to the server. So and then what happens is what, and then the next thing what is the function that should fire up if a request is actually being sent to that particular endpoint. So that is what makes up what your endpoint in Fast API, and it's pretty simple. Right? It's pretty simple to create endpoint. So with Fast API, we can create endpoint and we have it available in nothing less than 10 minutes. You see that how simple that is with Fast API. All right, so Barry, your hand is up. You have a question? Mr. Barry. All right, so we can't get hold of Mr. Okay, what's the question, Mr. Barry?
You said get is to go and read, then post is to send something to the server, right?
Exactly.
So like what if you wanted a link to be both get and post, like all these websites link where you read something there and you can also send maybe your details to the website. Like I don't know if you understand.
Yes, I understand. I completely understand.
So can you do both get and post to one URL?
Yes, you can do both get and post to one URL.
Okay, sir.
Right. So basically, how would you do that? It's simple. Just copy this route, right, and just paste it down here. And the thing here is that you just leave the route as it is. Just change the method, right? Just change the method. And of course, a Fast API knows how to handle every request that comes. So if it's a GET request that is sent to this about us, of course, the GET request for the about us will be fire up. If it's POST request that's sent to the same about us, of course, the POST request for the about us will fire up. So that is what you can do. Right, it's that simple. Is that okay?
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that's basically how those things are being done. You just replicate it and you just replicate that route and just change the method. But what you cannot do is that this same route, a single route like this cannot take more than one request in Fast API, right? In fact, so each route must handle one request at a time. All right. Any other question before we proceed? Any other question before we proceed? All right, so there's no other questions. So let's go ahead and let's proceed. Let's see what we can do for today's class. Right, so we have about how many minutes to go. All right, so let's see for today's class, we're going to focus on parameters. So, but the good thing is that we don't have to be creating multiple files. Except you guys want me to be creating multiple files for each of the concepts in FastAPI, then I can do that. But basically, you can write everything in this one file. I don't know what you guys think. Should we put everything here in this one file and then just make it, or should we just skip it and keep creating multiple files for each concept? What do you guys think? 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 Which one are we going for? Single file for everything, multiple files for each classes. But then if we create multiple files for each classes, then we somehow need to be putting some codes in those multiple files though. But whichever one you guys want, we can just go with it. So anyone, any option, any suggestion, which one should we go for? Multiple files or single files?
I would suggest we should go with the multiple file, so that as we are opening new file, we'll be I think there are some informations, or there are some lines of codes that we will have to rewrite, and as we are writing them, you'll be explaining, we'll be getting more understanding on them, and they will be syncing better. So, but if we just say we should keep using one file, I don't know if they will be linked together later, but that's my suggestion regarding that.
Okay, so I would love for us to work with multiple files, because I think if we just repeat a particular code over and over again, we just keep remembering where we keep repeating that code, so it sticks, right? So I think the multiple files idea is more recommended, right? So I'll create a new file, and this file, I will call this file parameters, right? Parameters. So I remember every FastAPI codes are basically Python files, right? The difference is that you have to bring in FastAPI, and let FastAPI handle basically everything in that Python files, right? So as usual, how do we do that? We have to go and bring in our FastAPI, because that is what we want, and also bring our entrance to the app, because without the invocation of FastAPI, this man is not going to behave as fast API. It's going to behave as our normal Python script that needs to run in the terminal, which we don't want this man to run in the terminal. We want this man to run in actual web web surrounding, like in actual browsers, or accept actual web requests, right? So that cannot happen without fast API. So what do? We bring in FastAPI from FastAPI. Very funny way of naming these things. So there's a FastAPI module that live inside FastAPI library, right? So we have to bring in this man. So this is the man that we want. And also, what do you want to do with that man? We want to invoke that man here, because that is where your application starts from, right? So when a request comes, that request passes through this invocation before that request finally gets to the desired route. It must pass through this man. Without this man, your request, without this fast API invocation, nothing works, right? Everything is seen as a normal Python script that will run in your terminal, and we do not want that, right? We do not want that. So you want this man to be able to accept actual HTTP requests and process them and send actual HTTP response, right? So that happens with this man. So after that, what else do? We can start creating our routes. So I'll create a very simple route, like what we did in our previous class. And this particular route, I will call this route. I'll call this route path. Not really path. I'm looking for a perfect name, but then basically I want each route to represent each parameter, right? So I'll call this path. I'll just take this path as greetings, right? I'll just call it greetings. I've run out of names, so I can't think of name right now. So and remember, this has to be a function, so I'll call this a function that takes nothing for now. And remember, this man has to return something, and whatever he needs to return can be any of our native Python data type. And what happens is that FastAPI will convert that data type to actual JSON file, something that other languages can process, right? But by default, you mostly, or should I say, by convention, you mostly want to be sending out dictionaries like this, right? Which can be considered as JSON form when they leave your server. It can be seen as JSON form, right? So I will call this and this man. I'll just simply say status. Okay, and status, and I will just say successful. But nothing really much, nothing really fancy about it. Okay, so and then remember this is to make this function to behave like an actual route function that should fire when a request comes. We have to add what a decorator on top of that function. If not, this is seen as what as a main function that lives somehow within your fast API, but then it's not be considered as a route. Remember, your route has to consider your route compares what of this function alongside what with the decorators. So at this point, to add decorator, you start with at. Every decorator comes with at, right? But in this case, you want to add a special decorator from the instance of fast API. So how do we get that? We say app dot followed by what the HTTP type or the HTTP request type, which in this case, sorry, this should be app dot, and then you can see all the available functionalities that lives within the fast API. So in this case, we want a GET request, right? A GET request, and of course the path. So the path, if I don't put anything in this path, it simply means that immediately after the domain name, it's more like coming here, right? That's basically what it means. Okay, so if I don't put a path there, if I don't put any path there, this is the same thing as me saying if the moment you finish typing that domain name, fire up this route, right? That's basically what it means. So, but then I also need to put path bits to identify this particular route. So I'll call this route greetings, right? Greetings. Okay, and that's basically all you need to do to create an endpoint. But then in order to test out this endpoint, you have to test out this endpoint in a web server, kind of, right? Because this application needs to run in a web server so that we can do what we can get a URL for sending this request. And you cannot just execute it as we've been executing our previous Python script. It will execute it as a normal Python script. So, but then what we want a situation where this can be executed and make it look as if it's an actual web server, but at the moment running locally, meaning what running on our device. But then we can test it, we can get a URL and do and test it out. So, so then how do we do this? First API have a package called UVCon. So UVCon can be used to do what to create that server-like looking form where you can know where this man can be hosted kind of but locally and runs as a web server, but in your local device. So how do we achieve that? We do what we simply bring in UVCon and use that to do what to execute this file. So I'll do that in my command prompt because everything that looks like a command, I want it to be executed in this my command prompt and not in my VS Code terminal. I don't the process of shrinking my terminal up and down is what I'm trying to do to avoid. But you can do that on your end if you want. So how do we do this? We simply use the package UVCon. So that we install this in our previous class, and then we say UVCon followed by what? Followed by the file that holds the entrance of your application, which in this case is what? In this case is parameters, right? Because that is the file that we are using for today's class. So I'll call this parameters, right? And then followed by what? By the instance of the fast API, which in this case, this instance is where is found here, right? So this is the variable that is holding that instance. So just reference that variable because we reference the file. So from the file, we can know what we can reference that variable. So to do that, I'll simply bring this man up again. So and then colon, then app, right? So you can put the optional reload, but I don't want to do that because this man is fond of not always allowing me to close my terminal. I don't know if it works like that for you guys, but if I do that on my device, if I work for a long time, my terminal doesn't close again. I have to somehow use a task manager and close the terminal, and also it lags my terminal. So for those reasons, I don't like using that flag. But if it works well for you guys, there's absolutely no problem. You can always add that. But for me, I'll come back here every time and manually do what? Refresh my server. Okay, so I'll execute that. And that should do what? That should somehow provide like a web server for our application. That is coming up. So now we have that actively running up, or we have that up and running as you can see. And we can and we've been provided with a URL that we can go to in the browser or that we can use for testing if you want to. So I can copy this man, right? And then I can go to my browser and test it out. So if I should paste it on my browser, at this point, I do not have any route I do not have any endpoint that says the moment you paste this man, it should execute. I don't have such endpoint. Remember, so so now this should show me that we do not have such endpoint. So when you see a detail not found, it means there's no route that matches that particular request, right? But the only route we have is /greetings, right? /greetings, right? And that man also takes in a get request. So if I click on enter, you see that should somehow show us what the response from our server. So we are up and running. It's working as expected. Is there anyone that has problem with how we move to this current stage before we proceed? Question before we proceed. Question. Anyone?
Hello,
All right.
sir.
So, okay. Let's go
Yeah.
ahead and ask.
Good afternoon.
Good
So in the
afternoon.
last class, you said you can only have one instance of FastAPI, but
Yes.
can you explain that? Because I thought it's like when we are in a folder now, so we cannot have like multiple instances of it. I thought that was what you meant, but now you opened another file and you imported and initiated it. So I don't know
Okay.
if you
Okay.
can
Right.
explain what you mean by that.
Okay. So that's perfect. That is perfect. All right. So when I mean that, but that we can only have one instance of this man, right, in your entire project, I basically mean that if you have a full working project that may have multiple files, that any other file that is sharing with this same file, say parameter.py, those files cannot have the instance of fast API. So at the moment, these files are seen as separate projects, right? That are separate. So these files are not communicating with each other, right? So main has nothing to relate with parameters, and parameters has nothing to relate with main. So that is why you can say that from our command, that we are only invoking parameter, right? We are only executing the fast API that is available in parameter.py. But you can say that parameter.py is like a separate file that has nothing to do with main.py, right? So it's seen as two different projects, right? But the moment I start bringing or I start importing or I start communicating with main.py, I can only have one. I mean that I have to go and get out the other one, right? So that we avoid complications or confusions with fast API. That's basically what I mean, right? So you can have, of course, your projects can have multiple files that will likely interact with one another. One file calling something from the other file and so on and so forth. But then in that whole folder, you can only have one file. But then if you have files that are not communicating at all, then each of the files can consider as one single project. So each of them can have their own multiple instances of fast API. That's basically what I meant. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so any other question before we proceed? Any other question before we proceed? Okay, so no problem. Let's continue. Right. Let's continue. Right. So like I was saying, parameters are basically ways in which data can come into our endpoint, right? So far there is no means of information coming to our endpoint, right? If you could remember in our previous, I think one of our classes back then, when we tested out someone else API, we were able to do what to send in data, right, to that API, right? And we were able to, and that data was our name. So I was able to take your name and know what and send it to the server, and the server will collect that name and will process it. And so the server was able to take to receive that name, and do what and send us back our response. But so far, the only one that we've built so far is basically what sending only the request and getting what response. There is no means of people sending information to our server, right? So that's basically what we are going to cover for this particular class. So a good thing is that we have a lot of parameters in fast API. I'm going to look at them one after the other, right? So the first one I want to look at is what we call a path parameter. Path parameter. So path parameter is basically one of the ways in which information can come into your server, right? And it's mostly used to identify a specific result, right? It's mostly used. So when I list out a particular parameter, I'll list out what is actually made or what is intended for it to be used for, right? So, but then I will also advise that after this class, you guys can actually pick up each of the parameters and look up their intended use, right? If you know their intended use, then you would basically know what kind of information you should send using which particular parameter, right? So, but for path parameters, right, it is mostly used, to identify specific results, right? To identify specific resources, right? Resource in the server, right? In the server, right? Or anyhow, but basically it's mostly used to identify specific resource. All right. So how does a path method looks like? So a path methods are those methods that lives alongside with your URL. So they are attached to the URL. They are part of the parameter, right? They cannot be excluded, right? Please note that what the path parameters are, they are attached, right? They are attached to the URL. Normally attached, they are part of, right? Sorry, let's use part of. They are part of the URL of the sorry, a lot of typo error up and down. So they are part of they should be there of the URL. They're part of the URL, and they cannot be excluded. Right, back to path parameter. So I was saying that what the path parameter is mostly used to identify specific resources, right? And they are part of the URL. So basically, they make up the URL, and once they are declared to be part of a URL, they cannot be excluded from that URL, right? They cannot be they cannot be excluded from that URL. Hopefully it stays. All right. So now I was trying to give an illustration of possible places where you likely see a typical path parameter. So have you been to a URL, let's say some website.com, and then you navigate to like their category page, and then in the category page they have like basically like 3 categories like this, right? They have books, they have events, they have photos, right? They have books, events, and photos. And then if you somehow click on a particular category, right? Let's say you click on book, what happens? If you notice the URL, it somehow appends that category here, right? And then if you click on event, the books here updates to events. All right. So what is that telling you? It's telling you that this particular route actually exists somehow. Sorry, that this particular route, right, actually exists somehow in their server, and somehow in their server, and it's declared like this. Like, so where this last part is known as a path parameter. So because it's a path parameter, it means that the values here will likely change. But then if you are coming here, you cannot exclude. It means that you cannot somehow arrive in a particular category without providing the category. So basically what they form part of that URL, right? So where this last part will always carry the particular kind of category, which in this case event, right? And then if I should now go to photos, what happens here? Now change what to photos. So you can say that this particular values is somehow used to locate a particular resource in that particular server, right? That is how a path parameter looks like. They are attached. They are basically part of a URL, right? And they make up that URL. And once they are declared like this, right, like this, you cannot exclude them again. It's permanent. So it means that anytime I want to go to this URL, I have to provide the path parameter. Do you understand? Do we get right? Please let's communicate that you are following. Are you following? Well, so let's mean that we are actually following. So that's basically how path parameter behaves, right? They are attached to the URL, and they are means of sending, and they can be considered as means of sending information to the server. So once we declare them, it's the user or the client have to always provide their value, right? The URL is not complete without them. Unlike other kinds of parameters that we can somehow make them to be optional, this man, once it is declared as part of a parameter, you have to provide that value. As far as that value, that URL needs to exist, that value must be provided. So let's see how we can create this kind of one, how we can create path parameters in how you can create path parameter in Python, sorry, in FastAPI. So it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple, right? It's not much, right? So now how do we see path parameter is what is part of the URL? How do we now add it to the URL, or how do we declare it in FastAPI to make it available for client to send in information? So it's easy, and you simply go to your URL, but basically a URL, I mean what, your path, and somehow provide it in the path and be like, okay, maybe after this point, this is where the path parameter should come in. After that point, after this point, or after the other point, and so on and so forth. So basically, what do I want? I can come here and just put slash here, and then to provide, and then to make this path to be what our path parameter params, right? What do? I need to include this man in what? In curly braces, because if I don't include them in curly braces, this will still be seen as being part of a path. It means that this is not actually like a variable that should change the value. It becomes a fixed path. It means that to come to this path, and this is the only valid path, right? But to make this place to what to make that place to be what, to be an actual variable that will likely change, right? To be any value, what do? We simply need to do what? To wrap this man in a curly braces. So how do I mean? If I should come here and put this man and put this man, right? This man becomes what? A path parameter, but then it's not still complete, right? It's not still complete. We also need to provide this same name, right? Provide this same name to what? To the function, to the route function. So basically copy that name and the same name and give it to what? To the route function as a parameter. So basically what happens is that this becomes our path parameter, right? It means that whatever value is added there, automatically it will be sent to what? To this man in a function, and of course we can get it within the function parameter and work with it. All right, so having that in place, let us go back and let us refresh our server. So like I said, I want to be doing my own server refreshment manually, right? And because it somehow I like it that way. All right. All right, so I will just execute my server again, and then I will go back, and then let's try this out again. So if I go back to my route, and then if I refresh this now, right, you get to see that we do not have such route again, right? Because what we now have a route that requires you to do what? To add a path parameter, add something after that backslash. That something can be anything of your choice, but apart there is something that's added there. It is valid, right? It is valid. Apart there's something that is being added there. It becomes a valid parameter, right? And it becomes a valid path parameter because something needs to be added here, either A or B or whatever, to make that URL a complete URL where this last part is what is our path parameter, and the values can do what? Can change. So if I should now click on enter, this should now show us our message. So that becomes what? That becomes a valid path parameter. So you can see that this part now becomes a part of the URL, right? We cannot exclude it. I cannot come here and remove it. We don't have such URL again, right? So the only URL we have is greeting / and then something follows, and that thing is considered as a path parameter. So if I come here and add anything, let's say hello, hello becomes what? A value that we can get from our server, right? That we can get from our server. So if I go back to my URL or to our source code, what I can get that value, whatever value was typed after this slash, I can get it. So how do I get it? Remember, I have to do what? I have to pass this same name to a function as a function parameter, as a route function parameter, the same name. So I can simply just come here now and just say what you type. I can come here and just say what you typed, right? And then I can do what? I can just pass in this man because that is what you actually type. So I can just pass in this man so that you can see that whatever you type, we've received it here, and we can work with it. We can process it. We can use it to do what? To fetch certain things from our server or do whatever manipulation that we intend to do. But the whole point is that that value that was typed here as a pass parameter can be received here, and we can use it within our function body. So if I should execute this code one more time, remember every changes have to come back and refresh. Maybe I should just do the reload, but the reload somehow lags my server. So I'll leave it. I'll keep doing it like this, right? So I'll go back, and if I should go back and refresh again, you can see that that I will get what I typed as what as hello. Hello being what being our path parameter, right? Basically, whatever I type, I have received it in my server, and I've done what I have processed it, and this is my response, right? So it could be anything. It could basically be anything. It could be hi, right? And then you see what I get hi. It could be it could be anything of your choice, right? Anything. It could be anything, right? And we get anything as part of the value, right? That is just one means of sending information to your server, right? Is that simple, right? And there is no law that says that every path parameter has to be one per URL. You can have as many path parameters as possible. So I can still come here and put another slash. I have another second path parameter. So I can have another one, another path parameter, and then what do I need to do? I have to copy the same name. Remember, if not, we cannot get it, right? If not, it will just be there, but we cannot get the actual value that was typed there, right? So I have to do what? Bring it to my function so that FastAPI will automatically pass it, and I can get it. And here I can say a second thing you type, second parameter, second path param, right? And the value here, I'll just put this another, right? Sorry, I'm running out of names, so that's why I'm having these weird names here. Please, they're basically your variable names, right? They're basically variable names, right? Please, you just put any variable names there and just use it, right? So now we have two path parameter now available. So it means that if I should go back again and refresh my server and go back and test it out, I can and then I try to make a GET request to that URL. You see that is no longer available, right? It's no longer this URL, this endpoint is no longer available in our server. Why is it? Because we now have two paths. So I mean, we are expecting like another thing to be added to make this path to be complete. Remember, path method becomes part of the path, right? It becomes part of the path. So we cannot do without them once they are defined, like we've defined them. So right, we cannot exclude them. You have to add it. So what I can now come here now and just add something that's like something, right? And then send again, and that should go through. So this is the first thing we typed, and this is the second thing that we typed, right? And one more thing again that they don't actually just need to be anywhere. Right? They don't basically need to be joined like this. You could just place them anyhow. So I can still decide to bring this man from where it is now. And just add it here, right? And of course, it means what? It means that I have to provide the path parameter first, followed by greetings, followed by what another path parameter. So you can arrange it anyhow you want to arrange it, right? You can arrange it anyhow you want to arrange it. So if I come back here and come here, and then basically what I want to do is to copy this man, right? And just replace it, take it back here, right? And just paste it there and just do that. And click on enter, and you see it works just fine. Okay, remember every changes you need to do what? Go and refresh, right? So let's refresh. And then go to Hanger and reload, and that should come back as expected, right? So that is working just fine. Okay, Mary Jane, your hand is up. Question.
Okay, so I wanted to ask that, this all these parts is depending on what the front end guys provide, right?
Yes. Basically, it's sorry. Please come again. Come. I think that question just the same stand up. Is
I
it
mean,
that
like the part,
are you
like this URL part that you provide
okay?
is
If
depending on what we are being given.
I won't really say it depends on what if it depends on you as the developer, right? You as the developer knows what you are
Okay.
building. You know what and how you intend to receive that information. The front end guys is to work with you with what you have, and not you work with what they have. They work with what you have. You get. So, but then you need to be sure that what you have is basically enough to solve the project, right? Or to solve the task. So you choose which of the parameters is convenient for you, right, to use and collect this this data from the client or from the front end guys, and then you know what, you use them. Once you establish it like this, it becomes automatically available in your documentation. I think if I should go to documentation, it should also let them know that this URL or this part requires that they should provide a particular value for that part. So let me see. Let's go to our documentation, which is redoc. So we have two documentation, right? By default, FastAPI give you two documentation. Let me just shift this thing down. This thing is hiding everywhere. This our meeting listing is hiding everywhere. So there's docs and there is redocs, right? So if you go to docs, so you say that it's available. So it adds those things there. So they know that that this part is meant to provide certain value, or this part is expecting this kind of value. Of course, you have to add some details of what part parameter is, right, and what another is, or what is expected of them, right? So it is you as the back-end dev that decide how do I intend to collect this data or this information from the client or from the front end. Also keeping in mind that every parameter has the kind of data it is intended for. Right. So let's assume that I am building a software for blogging, right? And then the front end guys need a situation where if someone should click on a particular category of blog, they should see the available blog or the available articles within that particular category. So how do I collect that category that I can use in filtering? The best option among all the parameters is path parameter, right? Just put the category in the path. I will extract it from there and filter all the available articles for that particular category. There's no point of me telling the front end guys carry the article and then send it through the header and path. It's not actually recommended. Please remember, every parameter has their intention or their intended use, right? So it's up to you as a developer, right? It's up to you. I believe I've answered your question.
Okay, thank you. I have another one. Like that's greetings now. What if you want to have another endpoint that is just for the greeting, so you create another one.
If I intend to have another endpoint for greeting,
that says yes, for the greetings only, instead of adding the path parameter to it.
yes,
So you have to duplicate.
exactly, and then you take off the parameters, right? Because the moment you add those parameters, they become part and parcel of that URL. They make a complete URL, right? So if you don't want that, then you can replicate it and have just greetings without the path parameters. Yeah. If you add any parameter, it means that you're expecting something, right? It means that you're expecting something. That's basically what it means. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. Fidelis, your hand is up.
So I wanted to ask, in that parameter now, sorry,
Okay.
if maybe like we copy this function greeting now,
Okay.
and you want to use a post method,
Okay.
can you change the parameters?
Yes, of
Like
course. Of course. Yeah, I can copy this, and then of course, please, once every parameter is for a particular route, when you go to the next route, you can specify what kind of parameter you want. So if you don't want it in this route, or you want a different one, right, you can of course change it and create a different one, right? So this parameter lives and dies only for this route, right? Outside this route, they don't exist.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can duplicate that and change it and use whatever and get whatever value you intend to get. Right. But the whole point of parameter is to collect something, right? So if you're using any parameter, it means that you're collecting something or you're expecting something to come into your server via that particular type of parameter, right? That's basically what you should keep in mind, right? Every parameter that you use, it means that you're expecting a value via that particular type, right? Via that particular type of parameter. Right. In any other question? Any other question? Any other question? All right. So the silence means that there is no other question. We can proceed, right? Okay. So that is basically how path parameter works. And well, maybe tomorrow we could look at, or maybe we could, yeah, we could also have validation, right? Because so far, let's just no well, let's just mix everything up. Okay, so far, what we've done is basically collect values, right, from path parameter, right? Now, how do we? What if we want to add? What if we intended to have validation, like add some certain validation, like let's say, and whatever is coming here as a path parameter should be this, should be that, or the length should not be greater than that, like all those kinds of validations. Or let's say the value that is coming in should be integer, right? It should be an integer, or it should be string, or if it's string, the character should not be more than 5, or if it's integer, it should not be less than 3, or more than, and stuff like that, right? So you can validate, right? You can validate. Of course, you can always come in here and write what in your if statement, and say, probably you can say if you could say if type of parameter, right? And the if type of, let's say, path pattern is let's say is let's say int, right? You want to check if the number, right, that's if the path pattern, right, is less than if the path parameter, right, is less than 3, and maybe you want to do something and stuff like that, right? This is way too stressful, right? This is way too stressful, right? So there are easy ways, right? FastAPI has put in places easy means of validating these values that are coming in, right? Just in case you intend to validate it, so that you don't just collect any random value. Maybe you intend, or you're expecting a particular type, or you're expecting a particular kind of validation of your choice. Of course, there are easy ways of validating these kinds of information. So how do we do this in FastAPI? And please, this validation works in almost all the parameters. They work the same way, almost the same way. How do you do this? So for a basic kind of validation, let's say a type, right? Let's say you're expecting that this man and this man, right, should be integer and not actual what string. So how do we do that? We do that using what we call type notation, right? And type notation in Python. Though we not really talk about it, but then it doesn't really do anything if you use it outside of FastAPI. But then if you use it inside of API, instead of FastAPI, it makes it compulsory. So let me show you basically what typing is in Python. So I create a very simple file. I call this new.py. So basically, this file has nothing to do with a FastAPI, just to illustrate basically what I mean by type annotation, right? Type annotation. Okay, so basically it means that if I should have let's say I have a function called hello, right? And this function I want to take in two parameters, let's say a and b, right? And then I want to somehow return let's say hi. Nothing much, right? Not very simple function. Now, if I try to invoke this function, right? If I try to invoke this function and then I click on enter, what do you see? You see this hint, right? Type hinting, right? Like you see this hint up there, right? Saying that this function takes A, right? And the A can be of any type, and also takes B, and the B can be of any type, right? That is basically type hinting or type annotation in Python, where you can add additional information about a variable or a parameter, right? Where you could say, okay, I want this variable to be an integer, or I want variable to be a string, and so on and so forth. It basically a means of adding additional information about a value. That's basically what type annotation or type hinting is in Python programming, or basically in programming as a whole, right? So you just provide additional info about A and about B. So the easiest way to do that in Python is just to simply come here after the parameter, you put colon and put any type. In this case, if I say int and then come here and put any type, if I should say float, right? And then you see that if I try to invoke this function again, right, the hinting here makes a lot of sense. In answer, that A has what integer, B has what float. But basically, it doesn't make it compulsory that A and B should be integer and float. It just helps your text editor to show you like a hint, just in case maybe this function is being declared somewhere else, right? And you're bringing it into another file, so that you can remember, okay, that your variable A is supposed to be what an integer, and your variable B is supposed to be what a float. That's basically what type hinting is in programming as a whole, or in Python, right? It doesn't make it compulsory. It doesn't make it compulsory at all. But if you do type hinting in FastAPI, FastAPI will take it upon himself to make sure that value must obey that that specified word type. That's basically different, right? Are you following? Please let me be sure that we understood this concept before I can actually go back
Sorry,
and
can I ask a
implement them in
question?
our FastAPI. All right, please ask.
Sorry, I have a question. So you said
All right.
if you do it like this on this function, so when you are putting your argument now, so it must not follow that rule. It must
Okay.
not be int for A. It must not be float for B. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, in normal Python, right? Outside FastAPI, it doesn't make
Yes.
it compulsory. It just shows up for as in your text editor, right? For reading sake.
Okay.
It doesn't actually make it compulsory. So I can still invoke this function and put some. Let me say I come here and put hi and put this other one here, let's say true as boolean value, right? And I'll invoke this man, and this man here will work just fine, right? It works just fine. So let's execute this man again. Let's see. Okay, sorry, I have to somehow print. So I can assign this to a variable called a, and I have to come here and do what and just print a, right? I'd say print a. So this error that you're seeing is coming from because I'm running this thing. I think with PowerShell, this thing coming up with PowerShell, right? So if I should now run this now, okay, you see we have high, right? So the function is executed just fine, right? Even if what a was supposed to be what an integer and b was supposed to be what float, it works just fine. But then if you apply the same concept in FastAPI, it makes it what mandatory, right? So it will try to actually it will try to actually convert those that it can. The one that it cannot convert, it makes it what to put the required what value, right? That is just the difference, right? That is just the difference. This is how type hinting and type hinting or type annotation works. You just put a colon and then you put the type. It's more like additional information, right? To a value or to a variable or to a function parameter and so on and so forth. That's basically that, right? But then if you use it in FastAPI, if you use it exactly, yes, more like that, yeah. So if you use it in FastAPI, it makes it compulsory, right? It makes it compulsory. So that is one way of violating your parameter in FastAPI. This is just the simplest way. But the most easiest way is what is typing, is type hinting or type annotation. That's the easiest version that you can ever do on any parameter type annotation. So let's go back and let's do that and let's see. So I'll come back to my parameter here, and then here, please, this thing can only happen in the function body, so that in the function parameters, right? It's not on this man. So I can come here and do colon and then put the right, but I can come here and do the colon here. So colon, and then I can provide that this man needs to be what an integer, and this man here also needs to be what needs to be an integer, right? And if I refresh my server and try to pass in something that is not an integer, you see that FastAPI automatically saves you from the stress of doing what we did that previous time of writing conditional ifs to check if this man is this and that, right? So it saves it from that stress automatically with just those two simple things, right? So if you go back and let us refresh, so let's send another get request and send this man. Then you see that this man will throw an error saying that the problem here is that that the input should be valid integer. So he tried to actually convert, but he could not. So he unable to pass string as an integer. So he tried to see if he can convert that value to an integer, but he could not. So for that reason, it threw an error. So it shows the problem, and then of course it shows that this is the man that's causing that problem, part parameter, and it is a part parameter, right? And same thing happens there. This is and this another here is also what a part. It's also a part parameter, right? So that is wonderful, right? That is wonderful. That is the basic form of violation that you can ever do in FastAPI. Do you understand? Do we understand? But then we can do other kinds of violation, which I will show us soon. Which I will show us. Question before we proceed to further violations. Question. All right, so the silence means no question. All right, so let's go back and let's see what if we were to add other means of validation. All right, so I was saying, what if we intend to have other kinds of validations apart from just type hinting, right? Or, apart from just doing what validating just the type, right? What if you wanted to add other means of validations, right? So the thing is that FastAPI has every parameter has a built-in function. So what you can do is what is that what you can invoke that built-in function, and then specify other available kinds of what I mean. So as we're dealing with path parameters, so basically it's used to do what to so path is what it can be used to what to add right. Sorry. All right, so I was saying that I was saying that I was saying that every parameter, right, has a built-in function, right, that we can import, right, and then add additional validations apart from what apart from just doing type hinting like this. So basically, what do? We invoke this parameter, right, and then we assign it to the parameter that we intend to see as part parameter, and then within it we can do what we can add additional type of what of validation that this parameter has to do what has to offer. So what do I mean? I can simply come here, right? Being that these are part parameters, right? Please, you only want to use part on a part parameter and not on any other kinds of what of parameter. So what do I need? What can I do? You can simply come and do assignment sign, and then do what we give the part invocation. So in this case, the part that we brought in, right? And then you can see that what that from my invocation, you can see these are the available what types of what of variation that we have for this parameter. We have max length. You can see max length there. We have max length there. We have range. You can provide a regular expression. We have a discriminator. We have pattern. We have mean length. There are a lot of things that we can pass within this function, and this function will simply use it and do what validate this our this parameter here called pattern. Right, so I can simply just come here and say, okay, so being that this parameter is going to be what is going to be an integer, I can simply say, okay, I want to add another kind of variation. Let's say I want to add that this man cannot be less than, right? So there is less than, so L is less than, right? There is greater than GE is greater than, right? I think there is less than or equals to. So less than equals to, I can't remember how it is. So less than, and let's see the full parameter. I can't remember how that actually was, but I'm sure of it. So there is less than or equal to. Let's look for less than. Let's go to LE. Let's see. Where are you? There is max digits, right? There's even max digits. There are decimal places. For that if you're dealing with if you're variating numbers, there is less than or equal to. I don't remember though. But okay, so it should be somewhere here. So there is greater than, there is less than. It's not there. No, it's there. No, it's definitely there. Just somewhere. There is greater than, and there is greater than. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I think I've seen it, right? So there is less than, right? There's LT. LT is for less than, right? And GT is for greater than, right? And then LE is for less than or equals to, right? So LE is for less than or equal to, right? So we got it earlier. We got it earlier. All right. So that's basically those kinds of parameters that you can use. So please, you don't want to use max length, right? On integer, because I think max length only counts number of characters in a string, right? So remember, each of these parameters has a specific means of or validating, right? So please don't end up using what is meant for string or numbers, right? So since that we are dealing with numbers, I can simply use greater than, right? And I can say greater than or equals to what? Let's say 10, right? So that means even if you provide an integer, the integer should be from 10 and above, right? And then let's go back and let's refresh and let's see if this works. Okay, so the law says that if we have this man needs to come last, right? So I think that is why you're having that error. Let's see. So let's see. Right. So if you have if your function is taking I'm not sure if I actually covered it in function class, but then if your function is having, okay, let's go back to new, let's talk about new concept. Remember, we are learning every day. So the function should have a parameter, right? Let's say a parameter that says, let's use that function there, right? There a parameter that says A and B, right? A comma B, right? And let's say you somehow assign a default value to one parameter, right? Let's say I come here and I say let B be equals to 0. Okay, that doesn't know what I want. That doesn't know what I want. Okay, let's say let's B be equals to let's say let A be equals to 0, right? So what happens is that because one of that parameter has a default value, what happens is that that parameter should come last, right? So if not, it will turn error. So basically what I mean, A should now come last, right? So you can have comma and then A should now stay there, right? So that's basically why I just switched this man up. So because what I have assigned a value to one of the parameters here, being what parent, so that means that this man should come last. If not, this man will throw an error. So all your function, all your basic Python concepts still works here, right? All of them still work. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go back and let's refresh and let's see. Okay, so if I cut this and refresh this man, go back to my browser, make a GET request. So let's refresh this now. I still have the same error, right? But if I should somehow change those value to integer. So if I change this man to, let's say, to 2, change this other one to, let's say, 3, I should still have another error saying that this man is still less than, right? So you said that this other one here should be greater than or equals to what 10. So you can see with those kind of things, we basically make some adjustment and some very quick violations without much stress, right? So it means I can just come back here and do what and put like from 10, all right, and that should work. All right, so we have the first parameter and have the second parameter right there, right? So it's working as expected, right? It's working as expected. All right, so that's basically that about pass parameter, and that's how you can do add some validations. So what you should know is that what pass parameters are once they are defined, you cannot remove it, right? They become part of the parameter, and of course you cannot exempt them from that parameter. And this is basically how you want to add additional violations. So you simply bring in that parameter function, which in this case is path, and then you do what you invoke it, and then you do what you can add in. So basically from here you could see that what you can see all the available kinds of violations for a path parameter, right? You can basically see it from here, right? So you just pick any one and then you do what customize it and proceed with your validation, right? Proceed with your additional validation. But one more thing is also the FastAPI doesn't recommend us to do what to assign this value, and this may lead to some problem in the future if you try to use this value. Okay, so maybe once we do one more parameter, we'll just leave it there for today's class because today's network is terrible. It's not even bad, it's terrible. Right, today's network is terrible. So please, after like one more parameter, we'll just have to end this class so that we don't end up, dragging us and killing our spirit. Because the thing about tutoring is when you proceed, when people are actually following, and then at some point something keeps taking you off. Over time, you lost the entire audience. So maybe after one more parameter, we'll just wrap it up, and then maybe hopefully on Thursday or thereabouts, we could have a better connection. Sincere apologies for any inconveniences, please. All right, so let's proceed so we can wrap it up. All right, so I was trying to say about that FastAPI doesn't really support us to do this thing, because the thing here is that technically, if you try to check the type of this man, the type is no longer an integer. The type is somehow being assigned tied to this part, right? So most times it has problem when you're dealing with dependency. Don't worry, once we get to dependency, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it, right? Once we get to dependency. But technically, this man here is correct. It works like you saw, right? But then it's not advisable. It's not recommended. So how does FastAPI say that we should do these things while still maintaining this type, the integer, right? What you can do is we can bring in another module called annotated. It's a very funny name. So from typing, we bring in this library called annotated. From typing import, right? Annotated, right? This man annotated. So this man doesn't actually do anything much than just to wrap a bunch of information together and see it as one collective information. That's basically what that man does. So how does it work? So this man takes into this one takes in two required things. So the first thing is mostly the type followed by any other value. So instead of assigning this man like this and also giving type like this, so what you could do is to make this more neat and more recommended, what you can do is you can clean this off and you bring in that man called annotated, right? Annotated, and then it's a list. So it takes in a list of things and then somehow ties to be seen as one collection of information, right? So first thing it takes is the type, which in this case is the integer here, and then comma followed by if you have any other variation, which you now bring in your path. So your path comes in there and you invoke it, and of course you can provide any other additional information. So this makes a lot of sense. This makes it neat while still maintaining the integer type, right? So this way you will not have any future problem, right? Trying to identify what type of and trying to identify the type of this man called path parameter, right? So basically, and that is basically what you'll be doing. If there is need to bring in additional variations, you have to bring in what annotated, right? So like we can tie that function, right? That parameter function alongside with the type that we want, and then wrap it up in this function here, and so that Python sees or FastAPI sees the word as one collective additional metadata or additional information about this variable called path, right? So that is that about path parameter. Question before we rush down to our second parameter. Hopefully network should not fluctuate again, right? Question. All right, so the silence means there is no question. All right, so let's look at another kind of parameter that we have in mind. Data around we want to look at. So I'll copy this one and just put it down here. So this time around, I want to look at another parameter called query parameter. Query. So query parameter, another means of receiving information from your another means of receiving information in your database, or in your backend or in your server, right? Another means of receiving information in your server, right? In your server. So query parameter it's almost similar to a path parameter. The difference is that query parameter can be optional, right? You can choose to provide it, you can choose not to provide it. As far as you specify that this parameter should be optional. But for a path parameter, it ties to the path, right? It's somehow involved in the path and cannot be removed from the path. But query parameter can be removed because query parameter is also a means of sending information from the path as well. But then, of course, this man can choose to be there or can choose not to be there, right? So that's basically the difference between query parameters and path parameters. And what is mostly used for? It's mostly used to filter or redefine or refine a request. So it's mostly used for filtering or defining of requests. That's basically what this pointers is used for. So it's not part of the URL. Yeah, it's part of the URL, and of course can be excluded once they are defined. They can be excluded once they are defined, right? And another thing again about them is that they only exist after they exist in your URL. They exist in your URL after the question mark operator, the question mark after this operator, right? After that in the URL. So sorry, not this man, this other man, right? So they exist after this operator. So that so if you've seen URLs, if you've seen URLs in other people's browser, you'll see something like this. Let me copy. So I think I did the so you see something like this, like HTTPS, and then you will see www dot some site.com, right? And then that's something like this that follows after this, and you can have something like, let's say q equals to something that you search, right? Something like let's say hello, right? Or let's say you could say we could say something like books, right? So if you've ever come across something like this URL like this, HTTP, yeah, if you ever come across something like this, right? So what you have here, or what you have immediately after this operator is what we consider as what as query parameters, and they come in pairs. So they come in the variable, right, alongside with the value, right? That's how they come. That's how query parameters exist, and they only come after what after this question mark. So that is how query parameter is being declared or is being defined in a URL. So now, how do we now provide the endpoint that should expect this kind of URL, right? Where the parameter comes after what after this question mark. So it's simple. I'll just replicate. Okay, no need to replicate. I'll just do a new one. Maybe I'll replicate and then just edit and it should work. All right. So I paste this man here, and then I'll call this query greetings, right? Query underscore greetings, right? And basically, because it's a query parameter, I don't want any path parameter, right? So I'll just remove this map and I'll call this query. And so the URL here is query dash what greetings, right? Assuming, right? I'm just running out of names, okay? And then, of course, because once we remove the path parameter, then we don't have need for this math again, right? So you can take them off, and we can take this man off for now, and we'll just say success for now. Right? So if we navigate to our query parameter, we should see success, right? You see success as what we type. So let's refresh and let's go back there. Let's see, it's working. So let's go to query greetings. So I'll copy this URL, which and then go back to my browser. Remember, I'm using browser because browser, of course, by default, they are built to do what to send GET requests. When there is need for us to switch to Postman for other kind of requests like post, I will switch to it, right? But both of them work the same way. Maybe I should just try using Postman in the next class, right? So if I paste this man here, of course, we should have the appropriate route of. Sorry, I have to take this man out 10, and then enter. We now have our query endpoint is working just fine. So if you remember in our previous class, we actually made use of a query parameter to send that data to genderize, right? Because remember the URL was similar to something like this, right? That URL was similar to something like this, right? Where we provided our name alongside with the value of our name, right? That is a query parameter. What we did, or what that server used was what a query parameter to know what to collect names, right? So how do we replicate that? We simply to replicate that. Okay, Barry, your hand is up.
Okay, sir. But you didn't, sir, but you didn't add the question mark like we were talking about.
You mean in the query parameter, like in the query URL?
You didn't add the question mark. You said it comes after the question mark, but you're still adding the forward slash. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
You mean in our browser up there, or you mean in our code?
Like you said, the query this comes
our
after
website?
So you said that the query parameter comes after the question mark, right?
Yeah, it comes after question marks in the URL. Yeah.
You're using / here. We're not using question mark.
You mean here?
Yes. Isn't it supposed to be question mark?
All right, all right. So I get your question because I think you're breaking and I'm losing the about. So the question is that I said that query parameters usually comes after a question mark in the URL, right? But then asking
Yes.
but that I'm not included that question mark in here, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So fantastic observation and fantastic question at the same time. Okay. So the thing here is that now this question mark needs to come in the URL, right? Not really in your source code, right? So your source code is basically you provide the parameter that expects that URL should provide certain things that comes after a question mark, right? So what you can do is your URL has nothing to do with when what is coming, right? What as far as you've provided the available parameters for a query parameter, right? It simply means that the user has to come to this URL and somehow at the end of this URL add a question mark, right? And add those required parameters. That's basically what it means. So it means that if I want this particular route, right, to have a query parameter, what do? I simply just give this function any parameter. So if I call this q, right? If I call this parameter q, right, it simply means that this man here automatically now accepts a query parameter of q and at this point of any data type, and the value can be of any data type. That's basically what it means. That's how you add query parameter in FastAPI. As easy as that. Just provide a parameter for the function and for the route function. But please, in a situation where your route function has like two parameters, like let's say query and path, please you know that the path parameter cannot repeat itself, right? So that means any other parameter after that will automatically be considered as well as a query parameter. That is how Fast API behaves. Any parameter that you provide here that is not a path parameter, right, is automatically considered as a query parameter. So it means that if I should now go back to my URL and try to view this endpoint that I've just finished viewing a few minutes ago, this one should now show an error saying that this endpoint now expects a query parameter called q, right? So you can see that automatically it expects a query parameter called q, right? So I know that query parameters they usually come after the end of the URL, after question mark at the end of the URL. They come after question mark at the end of the URL, and they come in paste the query variable, which in this case is q, alongside with the actual value for that query variable, right? So in this case, I can come here and put my question mark member and then put my q and here put my value for the q, which in this case I can say hello, right? And then I click on enter. And this should just work just fine. That is how query parameters is being done in Fast API, right? It's just that simple. Simply specify what a function parameter, a route function parameter, and that function parameter will be seen as well as a query parameter. As far as this parameter is not a path parameter, what do I mean? As far as I don't have something like this that says q, right? Then this man here is seen as as a query. But now that I have this man q, and then also having q here, because there is q here in the path parameter, this man here is seen as as a path parameter, right? But then if I should now provide any other one, let's say a, right? So in this case, what happens? Q is what is a path parameter, a is what is a query parameter. So if I should now go back again and then refresh, you see that I'm now expecting to provide two different kinds of parameters, right? The query and a path parameter, where q is what the query, so where q is the path and the s, I think, yeah, a is the query, right? So if I should go back and I refresh my page, and that should now show me errors everywhere. Saying that we are expecting two things. So we are expecting, so first of all, the endpoint is wrong because remember we have a path parameter. Remember, path parameter becomes what? A part of the URL. So because we don't have we've not provided that path parameter, that means we don't even have that endpoint. So the complete endpoint that we have so far is query-greeting slash something, right? That's the full endpoint. So far we've not added that slash something. So it means that we don't have any endpoint that just stop here, right? We don't have it. So what do we do? We can come here and provide a slash and then give anything, right? Anything, and then now we have what? Now we have a full parameter or a full path, right? So if I click on enter now, and I have what I'm missing a query parameter called called A. So but then we have a query parameter here, but since we gave it a wrong name, so it means that we don't even expect such parameter. We are expecting the one that is called A. So what I can come here now and do what and put A here and refresh, and this should now go through, right? This should now go through as expected. And of course, this is also updated in the documentation by default. So if you refresh this man should not tell us that we are expecting certain things at certain point. Right, so you can say that we are expecting a query parameter called Q. So you can see it's actually put it there. Apart from that, if we scroll down, we have two things. So one is path Q, which is what is showing there, right? And the other one is what is query, which is a, right? Which is A, right? So of course, the front end guys or the client should be able to know how query parameters is being sent, right? That comes after what question mark, right? It comes after question mark, right? Question. Right. So Barry, have I been able to answer your question? Right. Have I been able to answer that question, Barry? Or does someone else has any question? All right. So any other question? Any other question? Okay. So no other question. All right. So it means that we are fully. So far, so that is basically how query parameter works or how they behave. That's basically how query parameter works and behave. Very wonderful, very wonderful, right? So that's basically how this parameter works. Okay, so remember, if you take this man off here, it means that Q and A now becomes a query parameter, right? So now you'll be wondering, how do we now provide two query parameters? Do we need to come back and also do another question mark and provide for the second one? No. If you have more than one query parameter, how do we add all of them together? You simply add them, or you simply join them with ampersand. So if I have a second one, what do? I simply come here and say ampersand, and then provide the second one, which in this case A equals to, let's say, something else, right? I could say hello, right? And that is how you do one. That is how you keep joining them all together, right? In a case where you have more than so many queries and in query parameter in one URL. So you have to do what? You have to join them with ampersand. So if I should go back and refresh my server and send request again, right? So this should now come in as so this should now be seen as two query parameters because none of these parameters is available in the path. So it's seen as what is seen as a query parameter, right? So I go back again and specify this man and go back so and then I try to send this request, right? It sees this man as detail not found because we've removed these people, we've removed this part, right? We remove this part parameter, so this part does not exist again. So we take it out. And if I send this man again, we now have two missing things. Okay, we're now having one missing thing now, which is what query Q, right? So how do I now add Q now, right? I can simply come here now and do ampersand, and then Q equals to, I can have something else, I can say hi, right? And that should now work as expected, right? That should now work as expected. So of course, those two things have been sent to our server, and we can collect them, right? So I could say I could come here and say first. So just to show you that actually came through. So the first thing I can just show you, the first thing you type. So it means that that actually came to our server, that we received it. And then we can see the second one, right? And the second here is going to be what? Our A. All right, so if I should go back again and refresh, go back to our browser, send the request here. So you see that actually went through. This is the first query value, and this is the second query value, right? That is that. And of course, violations still work as seen for part, right? So the basic kind of violation that we can have is you can do the one that says int, right? And you can do the one that says int here. So by what that this is the basic form of what of violation. So it works for all parameters, right? It works for almost all parameters. So if I should now go back again and refresh, then it should now show an error saying that what that of course those query parameters should come in as what as integers, right? As integers, and do that. You see, it shows as integers, right? So it said that input should be a valid integer. So it could not convert the ones that we provided. So you can come here and then just put something of valid integer, and this man here, and then or let's say 50 or 60, right? And then you see that what that it goes through, right? It goes through. So that is one basic form of violation and of course we can also have what additional violation. So how do you do that? Same concept, the same concept that we did here. So I'll copy this man so that we can maintain the type, all right? So I just paste this man there, and of course I will change this to what to query because we are dealing with what we query. Remember I said that every parameter has their function. So I'll go back again and do a put comma and bring in query. So there's query parameter, there's a query function that you can use to add additional violations for query parameters, right? So I can just come here now and replace this with what we query. And of course, I can add whatever I need there, like let's say max digits of maybe of 20 and so on and so forth, right? So that is basically that, right? That is basically that for query. So query is pretty simple and pretty straightforward. It's similar to part, right? Similar to part. So question before we wrap it up. Question. All right, so silence means that we do not have question. All right, so yeah, sorry for once again, I sincere apologies for today's network. Today's network is one of the worst that we've experienced throughout this KodeCamp. Right, it's one of the worst, and hopefully it should not happen that way again. Right, since I'm situated with three network providers, but yet I can't get a good network. All right, all right, so that will be all for today's class, right? So we've been able to do what to cover two parameters in FastAPI, the basic ones, right? So far, these particular kinds of parameters are mostly used with get request. That is why you are mostly seeing me using get. It's because this kind of parameters are mostly used with get, right? You rarely see someone use part or query parameters with a post request. That it's weird. Trust me, it's weird. People really use it. That is why you are seeing me using get. So when we come to our next class, we'll look at the remaining about 3 or 4 or 5 of them. So we have other kinds of parameters that we will look at. So hopefully in our next class, network should be on our side, and we should cover up all those parameters and then let us go forth to our task, because definitely our task will drop tomorrow, right? So please check back in the LMS. Task will drop tomorrow, right? Task will drop tomorrow. So keep checking the LMS for the new updated task, right? So once again, shout out to all of us that have made it this far. It's not easy. It's not easy, but you guys have stayed consistent. That is a good thing. All right, that's a good thing. So in the absence of any other question, we will end there for today's class, and we will pick it up from here in the next time we meet in our next session, right? So have a wonderful day and see you guys in the next session. Bye.